origins of anti-Semitism date back to ancient times, which laid the foundation for thousands of years of targeting the Jewish people. For us to understand why Jews are targeted, we must take a deep dive into the historical, political, and biblical elements that birthed anti-Semitism as we know it today. Join us as we uncover the key events and cultural movements that led to the establishment of what many refer to as society's longest hatred. From one of the first known anti-Semitic documents to hateful Christian sermons, we'll take a deep dive into the early accounts of the persecution of the Jewish people. Today, we're talking about anti-Semitism, the discrimination, prejudice, and hostility toward the Jewish people. The longest hatred has historical, political, and biblical roots. We begin our journey in ancient Egypt, in the city of Alexandria. Alexander the Great founded the city in 332 BCE, and it was soon a powerhouse for trade, learning, and culture. The metropolis had 5 sections, one of which was the Jewish quarter, and was home to 35% of Alexandria's population. The Jewish community had its own leaders, called ethnarchs, who handled Jewish affairs, especially legal matters. They also set up a Beth Din, a rabbinical court, and built the Great Synagogue of Alexandria. But the city's cultural and religious differences led to tension, particularly between the city's Jewish and Greek communities. Around this time, we see early signs of prejudices and stereotypes against Jewish people creeping into society. One of the first pieces of anti-Semitic writing occurred in the 3rd century BCE, when an Egyptian priest named Matheno wrote Aegyptiaca. It was supposed to recount the history of Egypt and the exodus of the Israelites, but laid the foundation of dangerous misinformation and unfounded accusations against the Jewish people. According to Matheno, the Egyptian gods commanded the expulsion of the Jews from Egypt as they wanted to purify their country of unclean people. Clearly, they had a low opinion of the Jewish people. His account, which was presented as historically accurate, stated that Jews united and unleashed a reign of terror against the Egyptian population. Violence against Egyptians escalated, and Jews allegedly committed sacrilegious acts like killing, roasting, and eating sacred animals. Eventually, the pharaoh succeeded in expelling the Jewish people, leading them to establish their own state in and around Jerusalem. Historians believe Matheno wrote his accounts in Greek, which was a widely used language at the time, and allowed him to amplify his message. Another key element in the origins of anti-Semitism is politics, which brings us to the Roman Empire. We fast forward to the Roman conquest of Egypt, which occurred around 30 BCE to 31 BCE. Life in the ancient world transformed as the Ptolemaic period gave way to Roman rule. In 32 CE, Emperor Tiberius made Flaccus the Roman emperor of Egypt and Alexandria. Although Flaccus had a good relationship with Tiberius, when he was succeeded by Caligula, Flaccus knew he had to get in the new emperor's good books. You see, Flaccus supported Caligula's rival candidate to take over for Tiberius, and was involved in the prosecution of Caligula's mother. Since Caligula was extremely unpredictable, Flaccus needed to get him on his side. This meant furthering Caligula's mistreatment of the Jewish people. Caligula harbored a deep hatred for Jews and fueled anti-Jewish sentiments. Flaccus showed bias against Jews in legal matters and fueled anti-Semitic sentiments. He even issued a decree that stripped Jews of their citizenship, rendering them foreigners. Jews were herded into a cramped, oppressive ghetto with horrendous living conditions. Hatred towards them was intensified, leading to synagogues and homes being set ablaze. Members of the Jewish faith were dragged through market squares, tortured in public, and brutally killed. Caligula's birthday was celebrated by rounding up Jews and forcing them to eat pork, which is forbidden in Judaism. Anyone that refused to participate was killed. The unpredictable ruler decided he wanted to place his statue in the Temple of Jerusalem, an act that deeply offended the Jewish people. This brings us to the Alexandria riots, or Alexandria pogrom. In 38 CE, tensions between Jews and Greeks in Alexandria boiled over and clashes broke out across the city. We don't know for sure what started the fighting, but many believe it started after an altercation during a public assembly. Widespread violence and rioting took over the city, and both sides suffered casualties and destruction of property. At first, Caligula blamed all sides for the fighting, but soon changed his mind and declared it was entirely the Jewish community's fault. Widespread hostility toward the Jewish people persisted throughout the Roman Empire. In addition, the Jewish population in Judea was very unhappy with Roman rule. With growing Roman and Jewish religious tensions and clashes between Jews and pagans, the First Jewish-Roman War broke out in 66 CE. Jewish rebel forces overran Roman military positions in Judea, but Roman general Vespasian and his son Titus were called in to crush the rebellion. Internal strife among Jewish factions weakened the resistance, and under Vespasian's command, the Romans emerged victorious. Next came the Kitos War, something referred to as the Second Jewish-Roman War. This time, uprisings occurred in eastern Roman provinces like modern-day Libya and Cyprus. Again, Roman forces dismantled the rebellions and wiped out the once influential Jewish community of Alexandria. 60 years after the First Jewish-Roman War, the last conflict, the Bar Kokhba Revolt, occurred. Simon Bar Kokhba was a messiah-like figure and symbol of hope for the Jewish population, who trusted him to lead them to victory. At first, the revolt seemed successful, with the establishment of an independent Jewish state that lasted for over 2 years. But the Roman Empire was unwilling to let the land go and once again deployed significant military force to suppress the rebellion and dismantle the revolt. Having suffered a profound loss of life, the end of the revolt was catastrophic for the Jewish population in Judea. Jews were expelled from the region and many Jewish captives were sold into slavery. With that, we pivot to anti-Semitism and early Christianity. According to some accounts, Jewish authorities in Roman Judea wanted Jesus to be killed for blasphemy, but they didn't have the authority to execute him themselves. Therefore, they took him to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, who authorized Jesus' death. Remember, this idea was spread during a time when Christianity was struggling to gain acceptance in the Roman world, and since the Romans perpetuated anti-Semitic beliefs, it helped if the Christians did too. This also makes it extremely likely that they downplayed the Romans' role in the crucifixion. In the 4th century BCE, John Chrysostom, who served as the Archbishop of Constantinople, became the first Christian preacher to apply the word deicide, meaning God-killer, to Jews as a collective group. A Latin sermon written around the same time claimed that the Jewish killed Christ out of envy. This belief furthered the persecution of the Jewish people. Many nations barred Jews from holding government posts, joining the military, and working in most occupations. This meant they had to turn to commerce, trade, and money lending. Even though they were forced into these roles, their involvement in economic activities meant they were blamed for economic downturns and other financial troubles. Jews were also accused of outrageous acts such as blood libels, using the blood of Christian children for ritualistic purposes. Unsubstantiated rumors that Jews used children's blood for baking matzahs spread rapidly. Offensive artwork was even created with Jews wearing horns and performing blood sacrifices. The baseless claims continued into the Middle Ages, to a time when many countries segregated their Jewish populations into ghettos. The Black Death swept over Europe in the 14th century and killed millions of people, but Jews were the least affected populations. Since they lived in isolated areas and performed rituals of cleanliness, which involved removing grains from their homes as to not carry rodents, they lived in much more hygienic conditions than other communities. If you know anything about how the Black Death spread, you're aware that rats carried it across the continent. But that was not the explanation that society accepted at the time. Instead, people asserted that Jews poisoned Europe's wells and made everyone sick. We'll probably never know the specific origin of anti-Semitism and the reason why Jews are targeted. But by combining the elements such as the Alexandria riots, the relentless Jewish resistance against oppressive rulers, and dangerously inaccurate perception of the Jewish people in early Christianity, we develop a better understanding as to how this dark history began. Although there isn't one clear event or moment that birthed the concept of anti-Semitism, the clashes, rebellions, and outrageous accusations that occurred thousands of years ago shaped the narrative we grapple with today.